My parents compelled me to raise my siblings from age 6, while they gathered government funds for false childcare. When I attempted to break free for college, they reported me to CPS, but their deceit became the very snare that ruined them. The locks were changed, my bags were on the curb, and my own mother wouldn't even look me in the eye. That morning, I came home from my grocery store shift, the smell of stale coffee and disinfectant clinging to my uniform, to find my key, the one I'd used for 16 years, just wouldn't turn. A cold knot formed in my stomach, twisting tighter when I saw my few meager possessions, clothes, a worn backpack, my chemistry textbook, haphazardly tossed into black garbage bags on the lawn. Taped to the front door, flapping in the slight breeze, was a restraining order, bearing my name, secured by the very people who brought me into this world. My father, from inside, wouldn't meet my gaze through the window. My mother, usually so expressive, was a stone statue. Sarah, my younger sister, was there too, pressed against her bedroom window, tears streaking clean paths down her smudged face. Her phone was up, held high, and her lips mouthed two silent, heartbreaking words, "I'm recording." But what good would it do now? The entire family, the entire town, it felt like, was against me. Honestly, it wasn't a sudden storm. It was a slow, suffocating drizzle that had been falling my whole life. In my family, the eldest daughter wasn't just expected to help with the new babies, she was expected to become their actual mother. From the moment they came home, squalling and red-faced, the burden fell to me. I was 6 years old when I changed my first diaper, the plastic crinkling in my small hands, the unfamiliar smell burning my nostrils. My mother, a former teen mom, treated pregnancy like a recurring fever, something that just happened to her, unavoidable and inconvenient. My father, a construction worker, built things with his hands, but his paychecks seemed to vanish into new power tools or nights at the bar, leaving our fridge perpetually half-empty. They both came from sprawling, multi-generational families where this dynamic was just how things were done. Tradition, they called it. By the time I was 8, I was navigating a chaotic household with 3 younger siblings under my command. While my parents went out for date nights, leaving a void that chilled the air, I was heating bottles over a gas stove, rocking crying infants, my small back aching with a responsibility that felt impossibly vast. Each time my mother announced another pregnancy, her eyes would land on me, a weight settling on my shoulders. "Soon you'll get married and pass the burden on to someone else," she'd say, her tone as dismissive as if I were hired help, not her child. It wasn't just a prediction, it was an expectation, a prophecy I was meant to fulfill. But that was only the beginning of the nightmare. Fast forward 8 more years. I was 14, the cusp of adolescence, of wanting my own life, when she sat me down at the kitchen table. It was a formal announcement, she was pregnant again. Nothing new, really, except this time, she slid a neat notebook across the formica, emblazoned with the words "household schedule." My name was listed as primary caregiver from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m., a 17-hour shift. "You're old enough to handle night feedings alone now," she stated, her voice devoid of warmth. My father, from his worn recliner, simply nodded, his eyes glued to the TV. "We cancelled your after-school activities. Family comes first." My throat tightened, a dry, bitter taste coating my tongue. The worst part, the absolute gut punch, came next. They told me I'd need to get a work permit to buy diapers because they couldn't afford extras. They called it real-world experience. "This is what love looks like in our culture," they'd say, a phrase that twisted my insides. "You're so much better with them than we are." I learned early on that their love was a heavy cloak of expectation and sacrifice, stitched with guilt. My days started before the sun even thought of rising, at 5:30 a.m., making breakfast for 4 hungry children while my parents slept soundly, oblivious. I remember falling asleep once during a parent-teacher conference, my head lolling to the side, and my parents, instead of showing concern, told everyone I must be partying. The humiliation burned, a hot flush spreading across my cheeks. The youngest, a sweet, wide-eyed boy, started calling me Mama at the grocery store, and people would give us those looks, pity, judgment, curiosity, as if I were some teenage runaway raising a brood. This constant role reversal, where a child is forced to assume adult responsibilities for their parents and siblings, is a classic example of parentification. Psychologically, it often leads to profound emotional and identity issues for the parentified child, who misses out on their own childhood development and struggles with boundaries and self-worth later in life, constantly seeking to fulfill others' needs before their own. Then came the breaking point, the moment the fragile dam holding back my own dreams began to crack. I'd worked my fingers raw, sacrificing every ounce of free time, to earn a full academic scholarship to my dream college. The acceptance letter arrived on a Tuesday, crisp and white, a beacon of hope in the suffocating gray. For once, I wasn't an underage mother or a family workhorse. I was just Lisa, a normal girl, with a normal chance at a normal life. I was caught in the middle of happy tears, the paper clutched to my chest, when my mother burst into the room. "I'm pregnant," she yelled, a strange mix of triumph and despair in her voice. My face, moments ago radiant, fell, draining of all color. It was twins. The news hit me like a physical blow, stealing the air from my lungs. It was the same week my dad seemed to take his neglect to new, impressive heights. I was the one holding my mother's hair back when she vomited, the one massaging her swollen feet, fixing her bizarre pregnancy cravings, all while juggling the ever-present needs of the kids. The counselor from my high school called the next week, her voice kind but firm. I needed to submit final paperwork for the scholarship by 3 p.m. That afternoon, the baby, one of the younger ones, not the new twins, suddenly got sick. His cries were relentless, shrill and piercing, echoing through the small house. I tried everything, bouncing him, singing, desperate to calm him, desperate to get to that form. But the clock kept ticking, indifferent to my plight. I missed the deadline by 10 agonizing minutes. The scholarship, my golden ticket, was withdrawn for lack of commitment. My parents, when I told them, simply shrugged. College would have been selfish anyway, my mother declared, as if my dreams were an inconvenience, an insult to their burden. A cold, quiet resolve settled deep within me. I started planning my escape in secret, moving like a phantom through my own home. I applied to a community college, a less grand dream, but a dream nonetheless. I got accepted. I found a part-time job at a grocery store across town, working late nights, and hid my meager earnings in a tampon box under my bed, a secret stash for my future. My 16-year-old sister, Sarah, discovered it one day, her eyes wide, but she promised to keep quiet. She was the only one who saw. For once, it felt like everything was going according to plan. I had a path, a secret map to freedom. Until my parents found the acceptance letter. It was tucked inside my chemistry textbook, a foolishly sentimental place. The explosion was immediate and visceral. My mother's wails filled the house, not for me, but for her sacrifices. My father's threats were cold steel, abandon the family, and he'd kick me out. I said nothing, my mouth a dry, silent line. The next day, I came home from work to a scene straight out of a nightmare. The house was riddled with social workers, their official forms and sympathetic stares like another layer of oppressive humidity. My parents, playing the victims, had called them. They claimed I was the neglectful caregiver, that I was supposed to be watching everyone. The social worker, a sharp-eyed woman named Miss Johnson, saw through their thin charade. But the choice she offered me was still impossible. Either I stayed as the primary caregiver, or my siblings, my precious siblings, would be sent into foster care. My parents stood there, their faces contorted in smug smiles, believing they'd won. But I had an ace up my sleeve. Sarah, my quiet, watchful sister, had been recording them on her phone for weeks. As Miss Johnson, clipboard in hand, began her interview, my parents, arms crossed, stood their ground. Sarah, moving with practiced stealth, slipped her phone into my hand behind her back. The weight of it felt like a lifeline, pulsing with a silent power. "These recordings," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, a defiant tremor running through me, "they show everything." My mother's face went white, the color draining from her cheeks. My father lurched forward, a predatory glint in his eye, reaching for the phone, but Miss Johnson held up a firm hand. "Let's all stay calm. Lisa, can you show me what you have?" I played the first recording. My mother's voice, clear as a bell, filled the tense silence. Lisa needs to understand her place. She's the oldest girl. This is her job until she gets married and has her own eldest daughter to take over. Then my father's voice, equally chilling, if she thinks she's going to college instead of raising these kids, she's got another thing coming. We'll make sure of that. The room fell silent, the air thick with unspoken accusations. My parents exchanged panicked, desperate looks. Then my mother, resorting to her familiar tactic, started to sob, loud and performative. That's taken out of context. She wailed. Lisa must have edited it with one of those apps. Kids these days can fake anything with technology. My father jumped on it, seizing the opportunity. She's been unstable lately, talking about abandoning the family. She probably made this up to get attention. Miss Johnson looked between us, her expression unreadable, a cool mask of professionalism. These are serious allegations. We'll need to verify the authenticity of these recordings. My mother, sensing a reprieve, suddenly snapped her fingers. Call Derek. My nephew Derek works in IT. He can prove these are fake. Within an hour, cousin Derek, the family's go-to-computer guy, arrived with his laptop, a forced casualness about him. He was 25, all slick hair and practiced nonchalance. He listened to the recordings, typed a few things on his computer, then looked up at Ms. Johnson, a staged theatrical sigh escaping his lips. Audio manipulation is incredibly easy these days, he began, his voice practiced. There are dozens of apps that can splice conversations together. Without the original files and metadata, there's no way to prove these are real. Sarah's face crumpled, her shoulders slumping. My heart sank, a heavy stone plunging into icy water. Of course, the family would protect their own. That's what they always did, a silent pact of complicity. Miss Johnson made notes on her clipboard, her pen scratching against the paper. I'll need to investigate further. In the meantime, the children will remain in the home under the current arrangement. After she left, their masks dropped completely. My mother grabbed my arm, her fingers digging in hard enough to leave angry red marks. You think you're so smart? We're calling a family meeting. Let's see what Grandma Helen thinks about you trying to destroy this family. This phenomenon, where family members act as enforcers of the dysfunctional family system, often referred to as flying monkeys in the context of manipulative personalities, is a powerful social dynamic. They operate under the guise of loyalty or tradition, reinforcing the abuser's narrative and isolating the victim, making it incredibly difficult for the victim to seek outside help or even trust their own perception of reality. The next morning, our house, usually filled with the cacophony of children, was hushed, then slowly filled with relatives, their faces a mixture of concern and judgment. Grandma Helen, the undisputed matriarch, sat in the living room like a queen holding court, her gaze sharp and unwavering. She was my mother's mother, the woman who had raised 12 children and firmly believed suffering built character. I hear you've been making trouble, she said, her voice like sandpaper, recording your parents like some kind of spy. Her eyes narrowed. In my day, children who disrespected their elders got the belt. My aunts nodded in solemn agreement, their faces grim. Uncle Tony, the family lawyer, sat beside her, taking notes, a predatory glint in his eye. My mother, dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief, launched into a tearful monologue. Lisa's always been difficult. We've tried everything. Then, with a flourish, she produced a folder full of papers. I recognized the letterhead, Mrs. Patterson's counseling practice. She and my mother had been high school friends. The papers claimed I showed signs of severe attachment disorder, oppositional defiance, and pathological lying. These are fake. I protested, my voice raw with indignation. But Grandma Helen silenced me with a withering look. Children who won't fulfill their family duties are sick in the head, she declared, her voice booming. Your mother did her duty. I did mine. Every woman in this family has done theirs. You think you're special? Over the next few days, the family split into camps. A few cousins, their eyes filled with a fleeting understanding, privately told me they sympathized, but none dared to speak up publicly. Most sided with my parents. Family tradition was sacred, a revered altar. To break it meant betraying everything they stood for. My parents wasted no time. They filed paperwork with the court, claiming I was mentally unstable and had been turning the younger children against them. They wanted emergency custody formally transferred to them, with me barred from any caretaking roles. The irony wasn't lost on me, it was a bitter, metallic taste in my mouth. "You're going to regret this," my father hissed that night, his eyes blazing. "We've given you everything. A roof over your head, food, a purpose. And this is how you repay us." The next morning, it was over. My key didn't work. My clothes were in garbage bags on the lawn. The restraining order was taped to the front door. They'd claimed I'd threatened them during the family meeting, a grotesque fabrication. Sarah watched from her window, tears streaming down her face, mouthing, "I'm recording." But what good would it do? The entire system was rigged. I slept in my car that night, curled on the cramped back seat, the scent of exhaust. Fumes and despair filling the air. My manager found me the next morning when he came to open the grocery store, his face etched with concern. I begged him, my voice raspy, not to say anything. I needed this job more than ever, a lifeline in a storm. But word travels fast in small towns, like whispers on the wind. By the end of the week, 3 of my father's construction crew buddies had come by the store. They didn't say anything directly, just stood in my checkout line, buying single items, their eyes drilling into me, making snide comments about ungrateful children who didn't appreciate their parents' sacrifices. It was a calculated intimidation tactic, designed to wear me down. My manager called me into his office the next day, his face a picture of discomfort. "I'm sorry, Lisa, but we've been getting complaints. Customers say you seem distracted, that you're making mistakes with everything going on. Maybe it's best if you take some time off." My heart seized in my chest, a desperate bird trapped in a cage. "Please," I begged, my voice cracking, "I need this job. I don't have anywhere else to go." He looked away, embarrassed. "It's just temporary, until things settle down with your family situation." But we both knew it wasn't temporary. In a small town where my father's crew did half the construction work, crossing him meant consequences, swift and brutal. I spent the next 2 nights in my car, the cold seeping into my bones, before the women's shelter finally had a bed. The intake worker, a kind woman with tired eyes, looked at my restraining order, her brows furrowed in disbelief. "Your parents filed this against their own daughter?" I nodded, too exhausted, too defeated, to explain the twisted labyrinth of my family. The shelter was loud and crowded, a symphony of unfamiliar sounds, but it was better than my car. I had a bed, a small locker for my things, access to a hot shower, small mercies that felt monumental. I could figure out the rest later. The family court hearing was set for the following week. My parents had Uncle Tony representing them pro bono, a formidable, shark-like presence. I had no one. Legal aid said I didn't qualify, not technically, since I wasn't the one seeking custody. The morning of the hearing, I put on my best clothes, wrinkled from being stored in my car, trying to project an image of composure I didn't feel. Sarah texted me, her words a lifeline, "They've been coaching the kids all week." "I'm sorry." I walked into the courtroom to find my parents looking like model citizens. My mother wore a conservative dress, her hair neatly coiffed. My father, in a suit I'd never seen him wear, looked deceptively respectable. They'd brought character witnesses, my mother's supervisor from the dental office, my father's foreman. Even Mrs. Patterson, my mother's friend, was there, clutching her folder of fake therapy notes. "Your Honor," Uncle Tony began, his voice smooth and authoritative, "my clients are hardworking parents doing their best with a troubled teenager. Lisa has always had difficulty accepting authority. These recordings she claims to have are clearly fabricated. As our IT expert will testify, Derek took the stand, repeating his claims about audio manipulation, showing the judge examples of apps that could create fake conversations. He was smooth, professional, utterly believable. Then my parents testified, weaving a narrative of a rebellious daughter who resented having younger siblings, who made up stories for attention, who had threatened to destroy the family if she didn't get her way. "We love all our children equally," my mother sobbed, tears rolling down her cheeks, a performance worthy of an Oscar. "But Lisa has always been different, difficult. We've tried so hard to help her." When it was my turn to speak, I felt like I was drowning, every word I uttered sounding weak and unconvincing compared to their carefully rehearsed statements. I tried to explain about the years of caretaking, the missed opportunities, the relentless parentification, but without concrete proof. It was my word against theirs, a whisper against a shout. "Where are these recordings now?" the judge asked, his gaze piercing. "My sister has them," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Sarah. She's been documenting everything." "Your 16-year-old sister?" The judge looked skeptical. "The one your parents claim you've been manipulating?" Sarah was called to testify. She walked in, looking smaller, more fragile than usual, her hands visibly shaking. Our parents stared at her from their table, their eyes fixed on her. Uncle Tony smiled at her, a shark smile, all teeth and no warmth. "Sarah," he began gently. "Has your sister Lisa been asking you to record your parents?" Sarah glanced at me, then at our parents, a desperate plea in her eyes. She didn't ask me to. I did it on my own, but she knew about it. She encouraged it." Sarah's voice cracked, dissolving into a choked sob. "I just wanted to help." "Of course you did. You love your sister, but sometimes people we love can lead us astray. Has Lisa been telling you stories about your parents, making you see things differently?" I watched Sarah crumble under the relentless questioning. Our parents, I realized with a sickening lurch, had gotten to her, threatened her, made her doubt herself. By the time Uncle Tony was done, it looked like I'd masterminded some elaborate scheme to turn my siblings against their loving parents. The judge looked troubled, but seemed to be buying it. I felt the walls closing in, my breath catching in my throat. Everything I'd worked for, everything I'd sacrificed, was being twisted into evidence against me. That's when Miss Johnson stood up, a beacon in the storm. "Your Honor, I'd like to present some additional findings from my investigation." She pulled out a thick manila folder, its contents brimming with hidden truths, and approached the bench. My parents shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their bravado beginning to crack. Uncle Tony's confident smile faltered slightly, replaced by a flicker of unease. "During my investigation," Ms. Johnson said, her voice calm but firm, "I discovered some concerning financial discrepancies. Mrs. Martinez has been collecting government assistance for child care services for the past 8 years. My mother's face went pale, a ghostly white, her carefully constructed facade crumbling. My father gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles white. The applications state that she requires child care assistance due to her work schedule at the dental office. However, my investigation revealed that Lisa has been the primary caregiver during all the hours covered by this assistance." Uncle Tony jumped to his feet, a desperate attempt to salvage the situation. "Your Honor, this is clearly a misunderstanding. My client may have made some clerical errors." "Clerical errors that total over $20,000 in fraudulent claims," Miss Johnson interrupted, her voice unwavering. She produced photocopies of the applications, each one signed by Mrs. Martinez, claiming she was paying for professional childcare services. The judge leaned forward, suddenly very interested. "Miss Johnson, are you suggesting welfare fraud?" "That's exactly what I'm suggesting, Your Honor. Furthermore, Mr. Martinez has been claiming Lisa as a dependent on his taxes while simultaneously requiring her to work to support the household. He's been collecting child tax credits for a child who is functioning as an unpaid nanny and contributing financially to the family." My father stood up so fast his chair scraped against the floor with a jarring sound. "This is ridiculous. We've supported Lisa her entire life. Sit down, Mr. Martinez, the judge ordered sharply. Miss Johnson, do you have documentation to support these claims? Miss Johnson nodded and handed over more papers, bank records showing deposits from government assistance programs, tax returns showing dependent claims, and most tellingly, security footage from the benefits office showing Mrs. Martinez signing these applications herself, her signature unmistakable. My mother started sobbing, not the calculated tears from earlier, but genuine, gut-wrenching panic. We were just trying to make ends meet. Construction work is seasonal. We needed help. Then why force your daughter to provide free childcare while collecting money meant to pay for that exact service? The judge asked, his voice laced with cold fury. Uncle Tony tried one last time to salvage the situation. Your Honor, even if there were some financial irregularities, that doesn't negate the fact that Lisa has been exhibiting concerning behavior. The recordings are still suspicious. And actually, Miss Johnson interrupted again, her eyes glinting, I had those recordings analyzed by an independent audio forensics expert, not someone related to the family. She glanced pointedly at Derek, who suddenly found the floor incredibly interesting. They're authentic. No signs of manipulation or editing. The judge's expression hardened, his gaze fixed on Uncle Tony. Mr. Tony, were you aware that your expert witness was a family member when you presented him as an objective professional? Uncle Tony's mouth opened and closed like a fish, gasping for air. He has legitimate IT credentials. That's not what I asked. Were you aware he was related to your clients? Yes, Your Honor. And you didn't think that was relevant information to disclose? The courtroom fell silent, the tension palpable. I could hear my heart pounding in my chest, a frantic drumbeat. Sarah had started crying quietly in her seat in the gallery, no longer hiding her emotions. The judge turned back to Miss Johnson. What else did your investigation uncover? A pattern of parentification dating back to when Lisa was 6 years old. Multiple witnesses from the children's schools have confirmed that Lisa was often the one attending parent-teacher conferences, signing permission slips with her parents' consent, and handling medical appointments for the younger children. She pulled out more documents, each page a fresh indictment. I also discovered that Lisa's college scholarship was withdrawn due to missed deadlines that occurred while she was caring for a sick infant, the same infant her parents claimed they were paying professional childcare to watch. The judge reviewed the papers, his frown deepening with each damning page. Mr. and Mrs. Martinez, I'm going to ask you directly. Have you been collecting government assistance for childcare while forcing your eldest daughter to provide that care for free? My mother looked at my father, her eyes wide with terror. My father looked at Uncle Tony, who stared at the floor, defeated. Your Honor, my mother finally said, her voice small, a broken whisper, we were just doing what our parents did. This is how families work. The oldest daughter helps with the babies. It's tradition. Tradition doesn't override the law, Mrs. Martinez. Nor does it excuse welfare fraud. The judge turned to me, his gaze softening. Lisa, do you have anything you'd like to add? I stood on shaky legs, my voice trembling but clear. I just wanted to go to college. I worked so hard for that scholarship. I love my siblings, but I wanted a chance at my own life. When I tried to leave, they called social services and claimed I was neglectful. They changed the locks. They got a restraining order based on lies. I've been sleeping in my car and then at a shelter because my own parents made me homeless for wanting an education. She's being dramatic, my father started, his voice rising in anger. But the judge cut him off with a sharp gesture. Mr. Martinez, I've heard enough. Miss Johnson, what are your recommendations? Given the evidence of financial fraud and the systematic parentification of Lisa, I recommend a full investigation by the Department of Social Services. I also recommend that the restraining order against Lisa be immediately vacated as it appears to have been obtained under false pretenses. The judge nodded, his expression grim. I'm inclined to agree. I'm also ordering a forensic accounting review of the Martinez family finances. Mr. and Mrs. Martinez, you should be aware that welfare fraud is a criminal offense that can result in prosecution. My parents went white, their faces devoid of all color. Uncle Tony started gathering his papers, clearly wanting to distance himself from the toxic fallout. Furthermore, the judge continued, his voice echoing through the silent courtroom, I'm ordering temporary custody of the minor children to remain with the parents under strict supervision from social services. Lisa, you are not to be required to provide any childcare. Any violation of this order will result in immediate removal of the children. But who will watch them? My mother cried, a high-pitched wail. We can't afford. Perhaps you should have thought of that before committing fraud with the money meant to pay for childcare, the judge said coldly. Court is adjourned. Mr. and Mrs. Martinez, do not leave the state. You'll be notified of the criminal investigation proceedings. The gavel came down with a finality that reverberated through the courtroom, shaking me to my core. My parents sat frozen, the reality of their situation finally sinking in. They had tried to trap me, but in their twisted scheme, they had trapped themselves instead. Outside the courthouse, Miss Johnson pulled me aside, her expression a mix of vindication and concern. Lisa, I know this is overwhelming, but you should know that the forensic accountant will likely find more than just the childcare fraud. If your father has been claiming you as a dependent while you were working, that's tax fraud, too. I nodded numbly, the sheer scale of their deception washing over me. What happens now? I whispered, my voice hoarse. Now you focus on rebuilding your life. The restraining order will be vacated within 24 hours. You can return home to get your belongings. I'll arrange for a police escort if you'd prefer. I don't want to go back there, I said quickly, a shudder running through me. Not to live. I just want my things. That's understandable. Do you have somewhere to stay? The shelter has space for another week. After that, I shrugged, the future a terrifying blank slate. Without my job, I had no idea what I'd do. Miss Johnson handed me a business card. This is a transitional housing program for young adults escaping family abuse. Tell them I sent you. They can help with housing and job placement. I took the card with trembling hands, a flicker of hope igniting in my chest. Thank you for everything. If you hadn't investigated. You can thank your sister, she interrupted, a small smile gracing her lips. Sarah didn't just have recordings. She had a diary going back 2 years, documenting everything. Times, dates, specific incidents. That's what prompted me to dig deeper into the finances. My heart swelled with gratitude for Sarah, my brave, quiet sister. She'd been braver than any of us realized. As I walked away from the courthouse, my phone buzzed, text after text, a flurry of notifications. Family members who'd been at the hearing were already spreading the news, a digital wildfire. Some were angry, calling me a traitor, a family destroyer. Others were shocked about the fraud, their complicity now exposed. Grandma Helen sent a particularly nasty message about ungrateful children who didn't understand sacrifice. I deleted them all without reading past the first few words. Their opinions, their twisted traditions, no longer mattered. The next few days passed in a blur. True to Miss Johnson's word, the restraining order was vacated. I went back to the house with a police escort to get my belongings, the officers a reassuring presence. My parents weren't there, thankfully, but Sarah was. She flew into my arms the moment she saw me, clutching me tight. I'm so sorry they made me say those things. They said if I didn't cooperate, they'd send the little ones away. It's okay, I said, holding her just as tight, tears blurring my vision. You were so brave. Miss Johnson told me about your diary. I started it when you got your scholarship, she admitted, her voice muffled against my shoulder. I knew they'd try to stop you. I wanted to make sure there was proof of what they put you through. We packed my things quickly, efficiently. My acceptance letter to community college was still in my chemistry book, a little crumpled but intact. My hidden money was still in the tampon box, untouched. Small miracles, quiet victories. What's going to happen to us? Sarah asked, her voice small, as we loaded boxes into the police officer's car. I don't know, I said honestly, but whatever happens, I'll make sure you and the kids are okay. I promise. She nodded, trying to be brave, a flicker of hope in her eyes. Maybe now Mom and Dad will actually have to take care of their own children. The thought was almost laughable. They'd never had to before. But with social services watching, and criminal charges looming, they wouldn't have a choice. I moved into the transitional housing program the next week, a small apartment shared with 2 other young women who, like me, were escaping dysfunctional family situations. We each had our own bedroom but shared the common areas, a strange new camaraderie blooming between us. It was clean, safe, and most importantly, it was mine. The program also helped me find a new job at a different grocery store across town, far from my father's construction connections and their veiled threats. The manager there was understanding about my situation and flexible with scheduling around my community college classes. Yes, I decided to still go. The acceptance was still valid, and with financial aid and my new job, I could make it work. It wouldn't be the university scholarship I dreamed of, the one with the ivy-covered halls, but it was still a step forward, a path towards a different future. 2 weeks after the hearing, the other shoe dropped. My parents were formally charged with welfare fraud and tax evasion. The forensic accountant had found exactly what Miss Johnson predicted, years of false claims totaling over $30,000. Uncle Tony, citing a conflict of interest that had suddenly become very real, refused to represent them. They had to use a public defender. The irony wasn't lost on me. They'd claimed I didn't qualify for legal aid, but now they needed it themselves. Sarah kept me updated through carefully worded texts, a clandestine correspondent. Our parents were panicking, she said. They'd been ordered to pay back all the fraudulent claims plus penalties. The house, their symbol of tradition and control, might have to be sold. My father's construction boss had cut his hours after hearing about the charges, and my mother had been suspended from the dental office pending the outcome of the criminal case. For the first time in their lives, they were having to actually parent. No eldest daughter to dump the work on. No government money to collect while someone else did the job. Sarah said the house was chaos. The younger kids didn't understand why I wasn't there to make breakfast or help with homework. My parents were overwhelmed within days, floundering in their new reality. Mom actually had to change a diaper yesterday, Sarah texted me one evening, her words a mix of exasperation and dark humor. She acted like it was the end of the world. I should have felt vindicated, but mostly I just felt sad. Sad for my siblings who were confused and scared. Sad that it had come to this, that their parents had chosen this path. Even a little sad for my parents, who were so trapped in their own upbringing, their own rigid beliefs, that they couldn't see how wrong it all was. The family reaction was swift and brutal. Grandma Helen called an emergency family meeting that I, of course, wasn't invited to. Sarah reported back that it was a disaster. Half the family thought my parents were victims of an ungrateful daughter, a betrayal of sacred tradition. The other half, perhaps stirred by the revelations, were quietly admitting they'd seen the signs but hadn't wanted to get involved, too afraid to disrupt the fragile peace. Cousin Maria stood up and said she went through the same thing, Sarah told me during one of our phone calls, her voice filled with a new kind of wonder. She said Grandma Helen made her raise her 5 younger siblings, too. Then Aunt Rosa said it happened to her. Suddenly, everyone was arguing about whether it was tradition or abuse. The family was fracturing along generational lines, the fault lines exposed by the legal proceedings. The older generation insisted it was just how things were done, a given, an unchangeable truth. The younger generation was finally starting to question why it was always the eldest daughters who sacrificed everything, their dreams, their childhoods, their very identities. This stark generational divide, where deeply ingrained cultural norms clash with modern understandings of individual rights and psychological well-being, often leads to significant social upheaval and moral re-evaluation within communities. The questioning of tradition in the face of systemic harm is a critical step towards social progress and breaking cycles of familial trauma. 3 months into the criminal proceedings, my parents did something desperate. They fled. I was in my evening statistics class, trying to focus on probability equations, when my phone started buzzing relentlessly. I ignored it, the bright screen a distraction, until I saw it was Miss Johnson calling. I stepped out into the hallway, my heart hammering against my ribs, and answered. "Lisa, your parents missed their court date this morning. They've also pulled the younger children out of school. We believe they're attempting to leave the state." My blood ran cold, a terrifying chill. "What about Sarah?" "She's the one who alerted us. She's safe at school right now. She said your parents packed up the van last night and told the kids they were going on a surprise vacation." I sank onto a bench in the hallway, the fluorescent lights humming above me. They were really going to run. Take the kids, disappear into the anonymity of another state, rather than face the consequences of their actions. "What can I do?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Stay where you are. Don't try to intervene. We've notified state police and issued an Amber Alert for the children. Sarah said she overheard them talking about going to stay with relatives in Texas." Of course. My father had cousins there who probably had no idea about the charges. They could disappear into another big family where eldest daughters raising siblings was just normal life, where their toxic dynamic would be accepted as tradition. I went back to class, but couldn't concentrate, the numbers on the board blurring into an unintelligible mess. My professor, noticing my distress, quietly told me I could leave if I needed to. I gathered my things and drove back to my apartment, my hands shaking the entire way. The next few hours were the longest of my life. I sat by my phone, waiting for updates, every minute an eternity. My roommates, seeing my anguish, made me tea and sat with me, sharing their own stories of family dysfunction, a quiet solidarity that helped me feel a little less alone. Finally, around midnight, Miss Johnson called. "We found them. State police stopped them at a gas station about 2 hours from the Texas border. Everyone is safe." I sobbed with relief, a raw, primal sound, the tension finally draining from my body. "What happens now?" "Your parents are being arrested for custodial interference and violating their bond conditions. The children are being placed in emergency foster care until we can determine the best placement." "What about Sarah?" "She's 18 in 2 months. We're looking into emergency emancipation so she can maintain some independence." "Lisa, I need to ask. Would you consider taking temporary guardianship of your siblings?" The question hung in the air, the one I'd been dreading and expecting in equal measure. I don't know if I can. I'm barely managing to support myself." "I understand. It's not a decision you need to make tonight, but think about it. Foster care isn't ideal, and you're the only family member who's shown genuine concern for their well-being." After we hung up, I sat in the dark living room, the quiet oppressive, thinking. I'd fought so hard to escape the role of surrogate mother, battled with every fiber of my being to reclaim my own life. The thought of voluntarily taking it on again made me feel sick to my stomach, a wave of nausea washing over me. But the thought of my siblings, scattered across different foster homes, their already fractured lives further broken, made me feel worse, a deep ache in my soul. I called Sarah. She answered on the first ring, sounding exhausted. Hey, are you okay?" "Yeah, I'm at the police station. They're being really nice. They gave me hot chocolate. Ms. Johnson said they're looking into emancipating you early." "Yeah, she mentioned that." Sarah paused. "She also asked if I thought you'd take the kids. What do you think I should do?" Sarah was quiet for a long moment, the silence stretching between us. "I think you should do whatever keeps you safe and healthy. You've sacrificed enough for this family." But she trailed off. But maybe we could do it differently, together." Not like before, where you did everything. But like actual sisters helping each other. I could get a part-time job. We could apply for assistance, the legal kind. Make sure the kids get therapy to deal with everything. Break the cycle for real. I closed my eyes, feeling the immense weight of the decision, the enormity of what she was suggesting. It would mean giving up the dorms, finding a bigger place, putting some dreams on hold again. Or maybe just dreaming differently. College during the day, Sarah said softly, her voice painting a picture I'd never dared to imagine. Homework help at night. Soccer practice and PTA meetings. Normal family stuff, but where everyone pitches in. Where the kids see what a real family looks like. She was painting a picture of a future where responsibility was shared, where love didn't mean sacrifice, where we could heal together, not just survive. Can I think about it? I asked, my voice still laced with uncertainty. Of course. But Lisa, whatever you decide, I'm proud of you. You stood up to them. You broke free. That took more courage than any of us had. The next morning, I met with Ms. Johnson and a family court advocate. They laid out what temporary guardianship would entail. Financial assistance was available, they assured me. The kids would get counseling, crucial for their emotional well-being. Sarah would be emancipated and could be a co-guardian. We'd have support from social services, a safety net I'd never known. Your parents will likely get prison time, the advocate explained, 2 to 3 years based on the charges. The kids need stability during that time. Foster care can provide that, but family placement is always preferred if it's healthy. I thought about my siblings, the 8-year-old who'd stopped talking to me after our parents' manipulation, his small face etched with confusion. The twins who were probably so lost, so bewildered. The baby who'd called me Mama before I taught him my real name, his innocent trust betrayed. What about Grandma Helen? I asked, a flicker of concern. Won't she try to get custody? Ms. Johnson shook her head firmly. She's been deemed unfit due to her age and the fact that she knew about the parentification and encouraged it. Several family members have come forward with their own stories after your case became known. She's facing her own investigation now. The dominoes were falling throughout the family, the secrets they'd kept for generations finally brought into the harsh light. If I say yes, I said slowly, testing the words, I need guarantees. The kids get therapy. Sarah and I get family counseling to learn how to do this right. Financial support for housing and childcare, real childcare, not me missing classes, and help navigating college with this responsibility. All of that can be arranged, the advocate assured me, her voice gentle but firm. We want this to succeed if you choose to do it. The goal is to break the cycle, not perpetuate it. I asked for one more day to decide. That evening, I sat with my roommates and talked it through. They'd both escaped abusive families and understood the immense weight of what I was considering, the burden and the hope intertwined. The question is, one of them said, her voice soft but direct, can you live with either decision? If you take them, can you handle the responsibility without losing yourself? If you don't, can you handle the guilt? It was a fair question, cutting through my indecision. I'd spent so long being forced into motherhood that I didn't know if I could choose it freely. But maybe that was the point. This time, it would be a choice, my choice, born not of obligation but of fierce love. That night, I made a list. Pros and cons, dreams deferred versus siblings scattered. The life I'd planned versus the family I could build. By morning, I had my answer. I called Miss Johnson. I'll do it, but only with Sarah as co-guardian and all the support we discussed. I'll start the paperwork. Lisa, I want you to know how proud I am of you. Not just for taking this on, but for setting boundaries and asking for help. That's what breaking the cycle looks like. The process of acknowledging systemic familial trauma and then actively seeking support and setting boundaries to prevent its perpetuation is a profound act of psychological resilience. It demonstrates a conscious effort to heal and build healthier dynamics rather than passively replicating dysfunctional patterns. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Court hearings for guardianship, apartment hunting with a social worker, meetings with the kids' teachers and counselors, setting up therapy schedules, learning about trauma-informed parenting. My parents' criminal trial was set for the following month. They were being held without bail after the flight attempt, their escape attempt cementing their fate. I hadn't spoken to them since the first hearing, and I didn't plan to. Some bridges, I realized, were meant to stay burned. The day I got guardianship was surreal. The judge made it clear this was temporary, pending my parents' criminal trial and sentencing. But for now, I was legally responsible for my siblings. This time, however, it was different. This time, I had support and resources and my own choice backing it up. Sarah and I moved into a 4-bedroom apartment subsidized by the Family Assistance Program. It was in a better school district, close to both my community college and Sarah's high school. We spent a weekend painting bedrooms and assembling furniture, trying to make it feel like home, a real home. The kids were brought over on a Tuesday afternoon. They looked shell-shocked, clutching garbage bags of hastily packed belongings, their eyes wide with uncertainty. The 8-year-old wouldn't meet my eyes. The twins hid behind the social worker, their small bodies trembling. The toddler reached for me instinctively, then pulled back, confused, his lower lip quivering. "Hey, guys," I said, kneeling to their level, my voice gentle. "I know this is scary and confusing, but Sarah and I are going to take care of you for a while, okay? This is your new home." "Why can't we go home?" one of the twins asked, her voice small. "Because Mom and Dad made some bad choices and have to face consequences," Sarah said gently, her arm around her sister. "But we're going to be okay. All of us together." It wasn't easy. The first week was rough. Tantrums and tears and questions I didn't know how to answer. The 8-year-old, Marcus, finally broke down and admitted our parents had told him I was trying to steal them away. It took patient explanation from his therapist to help him understand the truth, but slowly, painstakingly, we found a rhythm. Sarah and I split the morning routine, a delicate dance. I handled breakfast while she got the little ones dressed. We hired a real babysitter for the hours between school and when one of us could be home, a luxury I'd never known. The kids did homework at the kitchen table while I cooked dinner. Sarah helped with baths and bedtime while I studied, the textbooks open beside me. It wasn't the college experience I dreamed of, no dorm parties or late-night study sessions in the library, but it was real. It was mine. It was ours. The community college professors were understanding about my situation. Several had been through similar experiences and offered extensions when family court dates conflicted with exams. My grades stayed strong, a testament to my determination, even with the chaos at home. 3 months into our new arrangement, something beautiful happened. I was making dinner, stirring a pot of pasta, when the toddler, Gabriel, tugged on my shirt. "Lisa," he said, using my actual name, a word that now held warmth, "can I help?" I handed him a wooden spoon to stir the pot, keeping my hand over his to guide him, a moment of pure, unexpected joy. "Good job, buddy." "I love you, Lisa," he said matter-of-factly, then toddled off to play with his blocks. Sarah caught my eye from across the kitchen where she was helping Marcus with his math homework. We both had tears in our eyes. This, I realized, was what love was supposed to look like. Not obligation or tradition or guilt, but choice and care in building something better. My parents' trial began the following week. Sarah and I agreed to keep the kids home that day, not wanting them to see their parents in orange jumpsuits and shackles. But we watched the news coverage that night after they were asleep. Both parents pleaded guilty to reduced charges in exchange for lighter sentences, 2 years for the fraud, 3 years probation after. They'd have to pay restitution and attend parenting classes if they wanted any chance of regaining custody after release. "Do you think they'll try?" Sarah asked, her voice hushed, as we turned off the TV. "I don't know," I admitted, gazing at the darkened screen. Maybe prison will change them. Maybe they'll realize what they lost. Or maybe they'll come out angry and try to go back to how things were. We'll be ready either way, Sarah said firmly, her jaw set. The kids are in therapy. We're documenting everything. We're doing this right. She was right. We had 2 years to establish a stable, healthy home. 2 years to help the kids heal. 2 years to prove that the cycle could be broken, definitively. I thought about the scholarship I'd lost, the dorm room I'd never sleep in, the traditional college experience that had slipped away. But sitting in our living room, listening to Sarah quiz herself for a history test while I worked on calculus problems, the quiet hum of the kids sleeping soundly in their beds, I realized I hadn't lost my dreams. They'd just taken a different shape, morphed into something richer, more meaningful. I was still going to graduate, still going to transfer to a 4-year university. It would take longer, be harder, require more juggling, but I'd have something else, too. A family I'd chosen to build, siblings who knew they were loved without conditions, a sister who stood beside me as an equal partner. The cycle our grandmother had perpetuated, that our mother had continued, stopped with us. Sarah and I would make mistakes, certainly, but we'd never tell the kids that sacrifice was love. We'd never make them choose between their dreams and their family. We'd show them that both were possible, with help and boundaries and the courage to do things differently. As I closed my textbook for the night, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Hope, not just for my own future, but for all of ours. We were writing a new story, 1 page at a time, each word a testament to resilience. The sentencing hearing arrived faster than expected. Sarah and I sat in the back row, a quiet, united front, watching our parents stand before the judge in their orange jumpsuits. They looked smaller somehow, diminished by months of legal proceedings and the crushing weight of their choices. The prosecutor laid out the case methodically: $32,000 in fraudulent welfare claims, 8 years of tax fraud, child endangerment through parentification, custodial interference, flight to avoid prosecution. Each charge carried its own penalty, a heavy burden. My mother's public defender tried to argue for leniency, citing their difficult upbringing and financial hardship, but the judge wasn't having it. She'd reviewed all the evidence, including Sarah's diary and the recordings that Derek had tried so hard to discredit. Mr. and Mrs. Martinez, the judge said, her voice stern and unwavering, you systematically exploited your eldest daughter for nearly a decade. You collected government funds meant for her care while forcing her to provide that care herself. When she tried to pursue education, you sabotaged her opportunities. When she sought independence, you used the legal system to punish her. My father's jaw clenched, his face a mask of bitter resentment. My mother stared at the floor, defeated. I'm sentencing you each to 24 months in state prison, followed by 3 years of supervised probation. You will pay full restitution of $32,000 plus penalties. Upon release, you must complete a court-approved parenting program before any consideration of custody restoration. The gavel came down, a sharp, decisive crack. My parents were led away without looking back at us, their backs to their broken family. I felt Sarah's hand slip into mine, squeezing tight, a silent affirmation. Outside the courthouse, Miss Johnson met us with paperwork for the permanent guardianship hearing next month. Given your parents' sentences and the stability you've provided, she said, a warm smile gracing her lips, I expect it to go smoothly. That afternoon, I picked up the kids from school. Marcus, the 8-year-old, had started talking to me again after months of therapy, his guarded expression finally softening. The twins, Rosa and Elena, ran to the car, chattering excitedly about their art projects. Little Gabriel, now 3, insisted on showing me the dinosaur sticker his teacher had given him, his eyes shining with pride. Where were you and Sarah this morning? Marcus asked as we drove home, his curiosity finally outweighing his apprehension. I'd learned honesty worked better than evasion. We were at court. Your mom and dad got their sentences today. How long? His voice was small, vulnerable. 2 years, but you'll be able to visit them if you want to when they're ready. He nodded, processing this, his brow furrowed in thought. Will we still live with you? As long as you need to. Sarah and I aren't going anywhere. That evening, while Sarah helped Marcus with homework and I prepared dinner, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something, a flicker of intuition, made me pick up. Is this Lisa Martinez? The voice was unfamiliar, professional, yet kind. Yes, this is Victoria Chin from the County Community Foundation. We received your application for the Returning Student Scholarship. I'm pleased to inform you that you've been selected as one of this year's recipients. I nearly dropped the phone, my heart leaping into my throat. I'd applied on a whim, encouraged by my English professor who had noticed my situation and my fierce determination. The scholarship would cover my remaining community college expenses and help with the transfer to a 4-year university, a bridge to a brighter future. The committee was particularly moved by your essay about breaking generational cycles while maintaining family bonds, Victoria continued, her voice full of genuine admiration. The award ceremony is next week if you're able to attend. After hanging up, I stood in the kitchen, overwhelmed, a wave of emotion washing over me. Sarah noticed first, her sharp eyes missing nothing. What's wrong? She asked, abandoning the math worksheet. Nothing's wrong. I got the scholarship. The one Professor Martinez told me about. Sarah squealed, a sound of pure joy, and hugged me tight. The kids looked up from their activities, confused at first, but catching our excitement, they began to giggle. Does this mean you're going away? Gabriel asked, his lower lip trembling, a fear flickering in his innocent eyes. I knelt down to his level, meeting his gaze. No, buddy. It means I can finish school here and then go to a bigger school nearby. I'll still be home every night. The scholarship ceremony was small, held in the quiet intimacy of the community college library. 20 returning students, each with their own story of perseverance, of overcoming odds. I wore my best dress, the one I'd bought secondhand for court appearances, a symbol of my journey. Sarah and the kids sat in the front row, a proud, beautiful tableau. Gabriel waved enthusiastically every time I looked their way, his small hand a beacon. When they called my name, I walked to the podium on shaky legs, my heart pounding with a mixture of nerves and triumph. The scholarship coordinator handed me the certificate and an envelope containing the first installment. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough. Enough to stop worrying about choosing between textbooks and groceries. Enough to hire a reliable babysitter for evening classes. Enough to believe that dreams deferred weren't always dreams denied, sometimes they just waited for the right moment to bloom. 2 weeks later, Grandma Helen died. The call came from Aunt Rosa, her voice carefully neutral, devoid of emotion. The funeral is Saturday. You should know that some family members don't think you should come. I understand, I said, and I did. The family fracture that had started with my case had never healed. Half of them still believed I'd destroyed a sacred tradition, an ungrateful daughter who had torn apart the very fabric of their lives. The other half had started questioning everything they'd been taught about family obligations, a quiet revolution simmering beneath the surface. Sarah and I discussed it that night after the kids were asleep. I want to go, she said, her voice firm. Not for her, but for closure. To see that it's really over. We arranged for the kids to stay with a respite care family for the day, ensuring they were safe and cared for. The funeral was held at the same church where I'd been baptized, where I'd spent countless Sundays wrestling with younger siblings while my parents dozed in the pew, oblivious to the sacred ritual. The reception hall was thick with tension, a palpable unease. Conversation stopped dead when we entered, our presence a disruption to their carefully constructed narrative. Some relatives turned their backs, their faces stiff with disapproval. Others offered strained nods of acknowledgement. Cousin Maria approached first, her own eldest daughter, a girl just a few years younger than I was when I started, at her side. I've been thinking about what you did, she said quietly, her voice barely a whisper. My Isabella is 15 now. I've been making her help with her siblings the same way. She trailed off, glancing at her daughter, a sudden flicker of understanding in her eyes. "We're going to do things differently." One by one, other cousins approached, some to condemn, their voices sharp with judgment, others to confess their own struggles, their whispered truths a balm to my soul. The generational divide was stark, etched into their faces, their words. The older relatives spoke of duty and sacrifice, the unyielding weight of tradition. The younger ones whispered about dreams abandoned and childhoods lost, their voices laced with regret and a dawning awareness. Uncle Tony cornered me near the coffee station, his face contorted in a sneer. "You destroyed this family," he hissed, his voice low and venomous, filled with raw hatred. "Your parents are in prison because of you." "They're in prison because they committed fraud," I replied calmly, my voice steady, my gaze unwavering. "I just told the truth." He stormed off, but not before I caught the doubt in his eyes, a brief, fleeting moment of uncertainty. Even he was beginning to question the narrative he'd helped construct. As we left, I noticed Derek standing by his car, looking uncomfortable, shifting his weight from foot to foot. He approached hesitantly, his shoulders slumped. "Lisa, I need to apologize. What I did in court, lying about those recordings, my mom pressured me, said family comes first, but..." He shrugged helplessly, a defeated gesture. "I've got a daughter now." Made me think about what kind of family traditions I want to pass on. I nodded, not offering forgiveness, but acknowledging his words. Some bridges could be rebuilt. Others were better left as rubble. The permanent guardianship hearing went smoothly, just as Miss Johnson had predicted. Our parents didn't contest it, perhaps finally understanding that their choices had consequences, that their reign of manipulation was truly over. The judge praised the stable home Sarah and I had created, noting the children's improved school performance and emotional well-being, tangible proof of our efforts. Spring semester brought new challenges, a fresh wave of demands. I'd registered for 18 credits, determined to graduate on time despite everything, my resolve unyielding. Sarah juggled her senior year of high school with a part-time job at a local bakery, her hands covered in flour and ambition. We tag-teamed childcare duties with military precision, our shared calendar color-coded and constantly updated, a testament to our teamwork. The hardest part, the most emotionally draining, was helping the kids process their trauma. Marcus had nightmares about being taken away again, his small body racked with fear. The twins wet the bed when stressed, their innocent bodies reacting to the unseen wounds. Gabriel clung to us constantly, afraid we'd disappear like his parents had, his tiny fingers clutching our clothes. Their therapist, Dr. Cassandra Williams, became our lifeline, a beacon of wisdom and compassion. She taught us about trauma responses and attachment repair, guiding us through the complexities of healing. Slowly, painfully, we learned to be the stable, predictable presence the kids needed, a steady anchor in their storm-tossed lives. Healing isn't linear, she reminded us during one particularly difficult week when Marcus had refused to go to school and the twins had been caught stealing snacks to hide in their room, a desperate attempt to exert control. "They're testing whether you'll abandon them when things get hard." But we didn't abandon them. We showed up, day after day, week after week, our love a fierce, unyielding force, proving that some cycles, with enough courage and compassion, could finally be broken. The journey I've walked, from a child forced into motherhood to a young woman choosing to build a family founded on conscious care, has taught me that the deepest strength lies not in enduring silent burdens, but in bravely challenging them. It's about recognizing the broken patterns and, with unwavering intention, forging new ones. It wasn't just my parents who were forced to face consequences, the entire family system, built on outdated, harmful traditions, had to confront its own complicity. And in that confrontation, in that raw, uncomfortable truth-telling, a new kind of family, a healthier one, was able to emerge, not perfect, but rooted in respect, choice, and genuine love. What does it truly mean to break a generational cycle? Is it about severing all ties to the past, or about taking what is broken and, with immense effort and support, rebuilding it into something profoundly better?